Hey darlings, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for being here. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you don't miss any of my tutorials. Thank you. So guys, in today's video I want to share with you how to make a one shoulder bustier bodice. And as you can see, I've marked out the bust line, the nipple line, underbust line and the half cut line. So now the neckline measurement I used was 3.5 inches for both the length and the width. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to measure the nipple to nipple distance, which is 7 inches. I'm going to add 1 inch to it, which is 8 inches for sewing the seams later on. So I'm going to be adding it up, divide it into 2, which is 4 inches, and I'm going to be marking it on all indication lines as I'm showing you on the screen right now. So guys, as we go on marking this, it's worthy of note that this measurement does not apply to all bust measurements. For instance, if your bust measurement is more than 40 inches, that is 42 inches to 45 inches, you should consider marking this bust distance at 4.5 inches. Then if your bust measurement is from 46 inches to around 52 inches, you should consider marking this bust distance at 5 inches. Also note that I'm making this pattern unfold. For the next thing I'm going to do now is to open it up like this, and I'm going to be marking the same bust distance measurement from the center front right here, marking the dot line again over there. So I'm going to be taking 1 inch from both sides of the dot line at the underbust line and at the half cut line. This is because I want the bust protrusion to be very obvious. That's why I'm taking 1 inch on both areas. Then to blotting up these sharp spaces, I'm going to be taking in some curves around here, and I'm going to show you how I usually smoothen this up. So right here, I'm going to be taking this to be the right side of the front bodice, and I'm going to consider where I want the shoulder to be and where I want the shoulder not to be. So I choose the right side of the bodice to have the shoulder, while the left side will have no shoulder. So I'm going to be leveling it out right here to avoid confusion. So right here, the next thing I'm going to do now is to create my princess dart bodice at this point, which is the armhole princess dart at the right side. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to measure 2.5 inches from this bust line upward towards the shoulder line, and I'm going to be marking 2.5 inches right there. Now after marking 2.5 inches, I'll connect it to the bust line, the bust point at the right hand side like this. Now that I've connected it, the next thing I'm going to do is to measure 1/2 inch above and below this point. Now this dart measurement I've marked below and above this point will help me to create a princess dart around the armhole line. So I'm going to measure in 2.5 inches in. I've seen some princess dart you measure all through to the bust point. It depends on how convenient it is for you to sew. I prefer to mark mine not more than 2.5 inches in like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is to connect the upper dart first before I deal with the lower part of the dart. So I'll go ahead and connect this first one. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to place my tape measure on the lower dart line right there, and I'm going to mark it upwards. As you can see, I place my tape diagonally, and that is more convenient for me always to connect in and to sew and to get the desired result I want. So now that I've marked it, I will smoothly connect it down to the 2.5 inches I marked inwards. And this is what it looks like. So the next thing I'm going to do right now is to start placing the bust measurement. And after marking in the bust measurement, we'll go ahead and mark the under bust measurement and the half cut measurement. So starting with the bust measurement, the first thing you're going to calculate is to measure the bust circumference, divide it into 4, then add 1 inch to that measurement for joining the seam after cutting. And you're going to be placing that measurement on the bust line. So let me explain again. You divide your bust circumference into 4, then to that measurement you're going to be adding 1 inch for joining the princess seam after cutting. Then you're going to be marking it at the side seam just as I've marked it here. So the next thing I did is to create the armhole line, which I'm doing right now, connecting the bust measurement to the princess that I've marked earlier on. Then you're going to add your seam allowance. Now here at the underbust line, you're going to divide your underbust measurement into 4. Whatever you have, you're going to add 2 inches that will be going out at that area, like this. Assuming yours is 7.5 inches, you're going to add back the 2 inches that will be going off at the dart area. Then you're going to further add 1 inch to this measurement for joining the seam after cutting. Then you're going to be marking it at the side seam. Then add your seam allowance. Now at the waistline area, that is the half cut area, you're going to use the same formula to mark in your measurements on this area. Then you're going to connect your side seams together. So next, I'm going to be focusing on the left hand side of the front bodice, and then I'm going to be modifying the length of the armhole line before I connect it from the neckline down to that point where I'll be modifying it. Now, to avoid this error on the screen as you're seeing right now, where the armpit's flesh will be showing, I'm going to be taking off 1 inch from the length of the armhole in order to create coverage for your armpit area. I'm going to be taking off 1 inch. You can go as far as taking off 1.5 inch off, okay, but I'm going to leave it at 1 inch for now, since eventually it's going to still go up to 1.5 later on, as you will see later. So now I've marked 1 inch now, and the next thing I'm going to do right now is to connect it right from the neckline to that point right there. So right now, to create the bustier effect on this left side, I'm going to be extending the dart line to this point. As you can see right now, I'm going to be extending this dart line upwards towards the neckline area. Now the next thing I'm going to do right now is to take off 1/2 inch from the dart line we have just extended right there and connect it to the bust point. This modification will help the neckline to relax and to also help create a bustier effect for the left hand side of your bodice. So as you can see, after this connection, the next thing I'm going to do is to mark 1 inch above the bust point area to avoid sharp points, and I'm going to connect these darts together like this. Now the next thing I'm going to do is for precaution purpose, to make sure that when I'm sewing my bustiers together it matches very well. So you can just extend this area by 1/4 inch, but I'm just going to be marking 1/2 inch right there because it's better to have more than less. So I'm just going to be adding 1/2 inch to that side, even though 1/4 inch will do well. So right now that I've marked this, it will help when sewing in your bustiers, both sides will match to each other. Now the next thing I'm going to do right now is to extend this side area where I'm going to be marking my bust measurements. I'll be extending it towards this way. Now after this extension, the next thing we are going to do right now is to add in your measurement at the bust line area. So at the left hand side is going to be a little bit different from what we have at the right hand side. So here you're equally going to take the bust circumference and then divide it into 4, then add 1 inch for joining the seam after cutting, and also you are going to be adding the 1 inch you are going to be removing at this dot line area. You're going to be moving it to the side seam so that when joining the front and the back bodies, both of them will still rhyme with each other. So it's just like you're adding 1 inch additionally to what you have on the right hand side there, just to match the front and the back bodies together. So now I'm going to be marking whatever I get in my calculation at the side seam, and I'm going to add the seam allowance. Now to create the armhole for the left hand side, I'm going to be connecting this point right there to the bust measurement like this. So now the next thing we are going to do right now is to use the same calculation we did for the right hand side at the underbust area. We're going to apply the same on the left hand. Now for reminder purpose, you're going to measure your underbust circumference, divide it into 4, add the 2 inches that you're going to be removing at the dot line area, then add 1 inch for joining the seam after cutting, then you mark at the side seam. So now after doing that, the next thing you're going to do is to cut out your pattern, and this is what I did. Now for the final modification, I'm going to be taking off 1/2 inch right here, then I'm going to be creating the curve for the armhole right here, and after that I'm going to be cutting it out, and my front bodice is ready. Now we're going to focus on the back side of our bodice. Now onto the back bodice, I'm going to be using a basic back bodice for this, and I've already marked out my zip allowance. Also right here, the neck length, the neck width is the same with the front bodice, which is 3.5 inches. So now what I'm going to do right now is to pin up this zip allowance and spread it open wide so that we continue with our modification. So here we are going to assume this to be the right side of your fabric, and the next thing we are going to determine is to find out where will be the left shoulder and the right shoulder. And since on our front bodice this was the right side of our fabric and this is the right shoulder, we are going to be placing, assuming it's a fabric, placing it right side to each other. And when we do that, we'll find out that the right shoulder for the back bodice falls on this side while the left is on the other side. So what I'm going to do right now is to label this to be the right and then the other to be the left to avoid confusion. Now to make the bodice to match with what we have in front, on this left side we are equally going to make the same modification as we did for the front, which is to take this armhole measurement upward by 1 inch right here. If you took off 1.5 inch at the front of yours, you're equally going to make the same modification at the back side, at the left hand side of your bodice. So now that I've marked this, the next thing I'm going to do now is to extend the bust line measurement at this point, then add my seam allowances on both sides of the bodice. Now the next thing I did was to determine the depth of the back side of my bodice, which I'm going to be leaving at this point. So now I'm going to be connecting this up to the neckline area, and my modification is complete. So now I'm going to be cutting this out. Now we're done with the modification and I'm cutting it out, and this is the front bodice while this becomes the back bodice. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that when I use this pattern to eventually make a dress, you'll be the first to watch. See you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.